Hello, and welcome to A Sunny Book Nook. Today, I'm going to be recommending you books based off of your astrological sign's element, or if you watch Avatar the Last Airbender, the various nations and tribes bending powers and skills. And if you don't know what those things mean, I'm going to get into that a little bit, and actually how the Avatar the Last Airbender kind of nations were kind of derivative of these astrological elements in the first place, and the powers that come with. Various astrological signs have other elements associated with them, and one of them is their literal element of water, earth, fire, or air. This is just one of the many factors that go into what makes each sign unique. Each category of being a water sign or an earth sign or a fire sign or an air sign has its own particular traits. So if you're an air sign, you are probably more likely to be flighty and tend to think very quickly, and sometimes are very talkative and are generally perceived as intelligent. If you're a fire sign, you're very passionate and fiery and bold. You're an earth sign, you are grounded in the material world and practical and stubborn. If you're a water sign, you are more, you go with the flow more and are deeply emotional and very focused on your inner life. So if you don't know what sign you are, if you don't know what element you are, you first of all need to know your sign. So I'm a Cancer sign, which means I'm a water sign, because Cancer signs, Pisces, and Scorpios are all water signs, and Capricorns, Tauruses, and Virgos are all earth signs. Libras, Geminis, and Aquariuses are all air signs, and Aries, Sagittarius, and Leo are all fire signs. So if you are a Leo, then you should really keep an eye out for the fire sign section of this recommendations video and see if the books I recommend actually do appeal to your astrological sensibilities. So we'll see. And what I mean by how it connects to the Avatar the Last Airbender kind of universe and magic system is that obviously there's Fire Nation, there's water tribes, there's the Earth Nation, and there are airbenders. These different nation states / tribes / communities have different characteristics as a nation, right? The Fire Nation is a fascist empire that seeks to conquer and destroy. That is kind of a reflection of the way that fire signs have a lot of rage and passion that can be sometimes, when brought to the most extreme, very destructive. However, they're still very effective in their leadership. And then in the show, there's the water tribe, which Katara is from, and Katara has a very maternal sort of instinct, and the water tribes are a really resilient group of people who live in the North and South Poles, so they really have to adapt to the world around them, and they're very family and community-based. Water signs are very family-based, or very interested in grounding themselves in community. So that is kind of a reflection of that. And the air nomads and the monks are very much people who are free-spirited and childlike, almost like Aang is, and very versatile and playful, but also sometimes unreliable, sometimes too chatty, sometimes have their head in the clouds a little bit, right? So that's why the airbenders are kind of reflective of those characteristics. And the Earth Nation people in Avatar are all very grounded, and the actual movement and physiology behind earthbending is about being stubborn and unmovable, and that is very much a core aspect of an earth sign's identity, that stubbornness and that deep sense of groundedness. And that also gives a lot of earth signs a lot of power with like greenery and doing physical things. Oh, another thing about fire signs I forgot to mention is that they're incredibly competitive as well, and you can kind of see that in a lot of what we as the audience get to perceive of the Fire Nation people, right? So anyway, that's just a kind of simplistic breakdown of how the various astrological signs play into and are utilized in the Avatar the Last Airbender world, which is why I want to combine them too. Something that's also important in regards to your astrological sign and your astrological identity is that your sun sign is not the only part of your astrological chart or your astrological self that really matters in terms of your whole identity. Get an app or whatever, get an astrological app where you can enter in your information and figure out what your moon sign and your rising sign and the rest of the planetary and house alignments. Those are also pretty important, which is why I'm making a video with all of the different elements being in one as opposed to splitting them up, because I think a lot of us have a lot of various, like, almost all of the different elements in our charts. I know that I have obviously a water sun, but my moon sign is an earth sign and my rising sign is an air sign. So I have those aspects of my identity as well. And you know, I love talking about astrology. That's where I really got the idea for this video, but let's get into the book recommendations. So first I'm gonna talk about water sign books, or books that I think are reflective of core values and characteristics of water signs, and thus books that I think water signs would really enjoy. And as a water sign myself, I definitely can endorse all of these books. Of course, I also wanted to include books that incorporated water as part of their story as well. So the first book I'm going to recommend is This One Summer by Mariko Tamaki. This is a coming-of-age queer graphic novel that is set at a summer camp for girls, I believe. And there's a lot of swimming in the lake that goes on, which is what made me connect it to water signs. But I also think there is something so fluid and emotional in coming of age stories that I really associate with water signs. So I highly recommend this book. Mariko Tamaki's graphic novels are really great in my opinion. The second water sign book I have to recommend here is What We Lose, a novel by Zinzi Clemens. This book is about a woman who grew up in South Africa or whose family grew up in South Africa, and she spends her summers in Johannesburg, and she is mixed, I believe. Yes, and she is experiencing that, both that coming of age and then also like sorrow and grief with the illness of her mother and her passing. So this is really a novel about grief and growth and young womanhood and identity. And I met the author and she's really cool. But anyway, this book gives me water sign energy because it deals with motherhood, which I associate with water signs and family and that dynamic, as well as the fluidity and the nature of community, as well as again that coming of age story. So highly recommend this book, and I don't think it really gets that much hype. Beautiful writing, really moving. And the last water sign book I have to recommend is The Deep by Rivers Solomon. Of course, this is set in the ocean. It's about people who are kind of like mermaids, and I feel that this is so reminiscent of like kind of the water tribe in Avatar the Last Airbenders, I think, because it is a group of people that have suffered immense loss, thus their like livelihoods and identities are so deeply impacted by it, and they live in communities and tribes, and of course they like live in water. And I think that I really associate water signs with memory and the past, and of course like motherhood and what that all means and all those things that are connected together with history and culture. And that's really what this book is about. And I think that it gives me so many water sign vibes. Another thing is that since water signs are so emotional, I think that grief and sadness and deep love and also trauma is all something that water sign books kind of share in terms of just like traits that I think I associate with. Let's get into fire, which is obviously the opposite of water, as in Avatar the Last Airbender they talk about. And for fire book recommendations, the first book I definitely want to recommend is Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. As you can see, there's literally fire on the cover, and the book is about kids who light up on fire when they are very unhappy. And I thought, of course, like that is totally a fire sign book, because of course in Avatar the Last Airbender, the show talks a lot about how firebending comes from a place of rage and anger, and literally that burning feeling inside being physically embodied. On the other hand, like opposite, water, because it is about healing, like some water benders have healing abilities. It's about like soothing emotions as opposed to like riling them up, which is what fire benders and also just fire signs and the element of fire does. It is equally destructive and necessary, of course, as a force of life. And anyway, back to this book. So the reason why I'm recommending Nothing to See Here, beyond the obvious fact of like, oh, there's fire, is that we follow these kids and this main character who is like their nanny, and the passion that she has for these children and these children's fierce protectiveness of each other, and the pain that is embodied like physically, and the way that like passion and the desire to move forward is kind of embodied in all of these characters. So I would definitely associate this book as a fire element recommendation. And the second book I have for fire signs / firebenders is I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erica Sanchez. And this book follows the coming-of-age story of a teenage girl who's the daughter of Mexican immigrants, and she feels a lot of rage at her family and at the world for how she has been treated and the ways that she is forced to be something she's not, and being told like what to do and who to be. And that's the thing that fire signs hate the most, being told like who to be or like what to do. And I thought that this book really embodied that passion and drive and ambition and the rage that can happen with fire signs who are not given the nurturing that they need. This book is a young adult contemporary novel that came out a couple years ago, and I really liked it, and I definitely would recommend. The last book I have that I think is appropriate for firebenders and fire signs is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, mostly because we follow a main character who's so ambitious and competitive and ruthless almost in her single-minded drive to be powerful. And I think that is very much an element of the Fire Nation and of fire signs, that ambition in the face of anything. Those are all my fire element recommendations. And now let's get into earth signs. So the first book I'm going to recommend is something that I have not read yet, but my friend said that it worked perfectly, so I'm going to take her word for it. Thank you, Eliza. She said The Roundhouse by Louise Erdrich, and I need to read this book sometime soon because it seems really amazing. But This book, it's a historical fiction about a Native American reservation that is attacked, and it explores kind of the trauma and resilience of these people and these characters, and I think that really makes sense in terms of it being connected to earth signs and the element of earth. So I need to get to this book sometime soon. The next book that I would recommend for this is Florida by Lauren Groff, and I think that this book embodies the earth element because it talks about nature and like the physical world and describes that, and also follows characters who are in some tough situations and who are truly being resilient and grounded in their material realities. This book has very strong earth sign energy to me. And the last book recommendation for the earth element is Dig by A.S. King. As you can see by the title and what this book looks like, it's obviously about digging, both physically and metaphorically, like the digging of the potato at this house, and that being kind of the root, so to say, of a family and a generational story that is connected in seemingly disparate characters, and how it all comes together to reveal something very strange yet necessary. And I think that this book obviously deals with that groundedness and also the resilience of people. So this book has earth element energy to me. And finally, we're going to talk about the air element. For this element slash bending style, I would first have to recommend The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee, because this has a lot of humor and the plot is very spontaneous and flighty, as is the main character. And the main character is very witty and sharp-tongued and doesn't always make the best decisions, but it gives me so much air energy because of that, because of all those things. The characterization of the main character and the plot elements and just the unexpectedness and the hilarity of it, I think is totally what air signs and airbenders are all about. The next book I have to recommend for this is Franny and Zoe by J.D. Salinger. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I think that this embodies air so much because it is so pretentious and also like critical of pretentious college kids, and it's like verbose in that way, but also like clearly with the characters like heads in the clouds kind of. And it's like two novellas kind of that are not that related. I really enjoyed it, and I do think it gives me that intelligent and whimsical air sign energy. Finally, I have to recommend We Regret to Inform You by Ariel Kaplan. This book gives me air sign energy because it follows this senior in high school. It's a young adult contemporary novel, and she is really like baffled because she's not gotten any acceptance letters to like universities that she applied to, even though given her academic standing and her extracurriculars, she should have gotten to like Harvard. And it turns out that someone is sabotaging her application. And I think that this book embodies air signs because like Geminis are like known to be incredibly smart, right? And so there's like that element of the main character's characterization there. And like Libras and Aquariuses are also very focused on justice and achieving a better and equal and socially just world. And what this book is kind of about is her tackling with the unfairness of her private school, basically screwing her over. Those are all of my book recommendations based on elemental signs. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it entertaining or informative. And thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stupid bullshit. Bye!